Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the fifth and final in this series of webinars. Today, we're very pleased to have Kerr and Steve here from the National Cybersecurity Centre to give you an overview of who it is, what it does, and how it is involved with schools. Welcome, Kerr and Steve. It's great to have you here today with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Chris, and thank you, Sean, as well. So my name is Kerr, and I'm the Schools Engagement Lead at the National Cybersecurity Centre, or NCSC for short. The NCSC, as you can see in the top left-hand corner of the slide, is part of GCHQ, and it's the UK's technical authority for cyber threats. Okay, so let's talk briefly about my organisation and what I do. So the NCSC has been in existence for just over 6 years. And one of our core aims, as you can see on the slide there, is to make the UK the safest place to live and work online. So in a nutshell, we help protect organisations in the UK from cyber attack by helping them improve their cyber resilience. These include critical national infrastructure organisations like nuclear power stations, sensitive sectors like national and local government. I would say in one form or another, the NCSC will typically engage and promote cybersecurity best practice with just about all sectors across the UK, even down to individuals and families. And that obviously includes schools, which is why I'm here talking to yourselves today. So I engage with all organisations that have a stake in promoting cybersecurity in schools. So that might be with local authorities, the different departments for education, the various managed service providers out there, charities, and all the other different school representative bodies like EduGeek. And I'm really looking forward, not just throughout this session, but going forward, continuing and expanding that engagement with yourselves through EduGeek. I would also like to take this opportunity on this slide to point out that the NCSC is not a regulator. We are not Ofqual, we're not Ofsted, we are part of government, but we're not the ICO. Why I say that is because should you wish to discuss through EduGeek some of your issues, or even come to us because there is a significant event going on in your organization, don't feel that we're going to hit you over the head with a regulatory hammer. That won't be the case. We'll be there to advise and help. So just briefly, in today's session, I'm going to outline some of the key threat actors in a school setting. I'll also briefly explain why schools are targeted, and I'm sure you already know that, but it's probably worth me going over it again just so you know what we know as well. I'll also highlight some helpful cybersecurity resources so that you and your school can progress on the cybersecurity journey together. I'll then pass over to Steve, who will discuss some of the more technical NCSC resources that are at your disposal and are available to schools. But to begin with, I'm going to show you some results from a very recent cybersecurity audit that we published only last week. So last year, in 2022, we asked over 800 schools about their cybersecurity experiences. And the aim of the audit was to provide us and the sector, and when I say the sector, I mean yourselves, with an up-to-date evidence based on the cyber posture of UK schools. And that's so that we as an organisation, but also yourselves, can use that material to engage with your school or suppliers. So it may well be that you want to promote cyber resilience or cybersecurity within your organization, but you don't have that evidence base. Hopefully, some of the findings in this audit will help you promote that agenda. So it really is first and foremost an evidence base, but not just for government, it's for everybody in the sector to act on. We also wanted to identify trends. So because the 2022 survey asks almost identical questions to the 2019 version, both ourselves and the sector can see those areas where schools are progressing with, and those elements or areas that might need a little bit more focus from us and from yourselves and other partners in the future. And I'd say lastly, the report from the audit could also be seen as a guidance piece. So it doesn't just highlight the cybersecurity gaps in the sector or give a kind of qualitative analysis of what's going on. Throughout the whole report, the NCSC report is riddled with advice and guidance so that schools can actually act and know how to improve their cybersecurity posture. And that's quite a distinction from the 2019 audit, when we had quite a small offer to the education sector, whereas now I think we've got quite a coherent large piece to communicate to the sector. And I'll go into that a little bit more detail later. So in terms of the kind of mechanics of the report, so we did it jointly, as you can see, with in one of the small pictures in the right-hand side. We did it jointly with the London Grid for Learning. So you'll find this quite a lot with the team, the schools team, which I head. We try and work with the sector by default, and that's just a kind of jazzy way of saying we don't try and understand everything, and so we try and work through partners like EduGeek and other representative bodies to really get that full picture of what it's like at the coalface. But we also try and work with yourselves and other organizations because you are trusted brands within the education sector. So it's effective for the end customer, it's effective for us, and the whole idea being that we are all trying to improve cyber resilience across the sector, so let's work together. The actual report itself is situated on the London Grid for Learning website, although it's referred to via a blog post on our website, and you can see that other picture on the slide behind the report. So please do go to our NCSE website and look for that, and I'll show you where you can do that later in the presentation. And lastly, I've mentioned this before, but the audit is essentially a repeat of 2019 with some additional questions added to give us those trends and how schools are progressing on their cybersecurity journey. So just quickly to talk about some of the key highlights. So 53% of those asked this year felt prepared for a cyber attack, and that was up from 49% in 2019. So it's a 4% jump. It might not seem massive, but at least we're going in a direction, and that's a good sign for me. If I could get 2 or 3% every year in 10 years, that would be a good overall result. But we would like to go quicker, but we're going in the right direction, so that's all positive. 78% of schools asked had experienced some kind of cybersecurity incident, and so that's quite a key stat, really. And that's what I would use with partners and leaders in your organization, because it really does spell out quite plainly that cyber risk is still prevalent in the sector, just like any other sector. So I think that stat really helps things hit home. 55% of schools stated that their staff had received cybersecurity training, and that was up from 35% in 2019. So again, that's really, really positive. And 46% of schools asked were aware of the NCSC's free cybersecurity training for school staff. And that was a key ask from the last 2019 audit. I think one of the questions were, would you welcome some free training for school staff? So it looks like the schools that we asked, and it was a random sample, the schools that we asked seem to have acted on that, been made aware of it, and actually taken forward the training in their organization, which is all good and positive. So going forward, it said in the latest report or the latest audit that 49% of schools now have planning documentation in place for a cyber breach or attack, and that's basically like plans, business continuity plans, risk registers, all that sort of thing. That does show that there is a kind of space to improve, and we have been working with Derbyshire County Council over the last year to produce those templates and documents, and I think for the next year we'll be working with DFE to try and promote them more at a national level, and all those resources will be free, so please watch this space on that. You should be able to access all those resources from the Derbyshire County Council website, but please drop me a line later if you don't know where that is, and I'll send you the link. But as before, it should all be on a national website before long. So the report shows us obviously that there is more to be done where cybersecurity is concerned. The development and promotion of the staff training has been a success. The messages are getting out there, but there was way more to be done by the NCSE and the sector and yourselves. So we look forward to kind of working with you on that in the future. So let me talk briefly about who could pose a threat to a school. And this is a small threat brief, and I'll be quite quick here because I know Steve wants to talk about some other stuff. Cyber criminals might attack a school. You can see that in the first column there, and that can be either targeted or untargeted. No matter which way it is, it's usually always for financial gain. The recent ransomware attacks on the schools sector illustrates just how potent that threat can be. And I should add, there is no information to say that schools are being specifically targeted, and that is the NCSE's position and DFE's. However, we do know criminals scan the internet for organizations that have weak security defenses. And I always like to think about it as the opportunistic burglar walking down the street looking for properties with open windows. It's very much like that, but in the cyber world. And these criminals genuinely don't care if those windows belong to a school or a cancer charity. You're all the same. You're all fair game. And it's not just ransomware. Criminals can steal money through other routes, like pretending to be a supplier and, for example, asking for an urgent payment on an invoice. And we do hear anecdotally quite a lot of situations and incidents like that. I think it's probably worth me talking very briefly about the BBC News article that came out recently, earlier in the month, regarding ransomware. So our position is that we haven't seen a specific rise in the targeting of schools or number of incidents in the sector. We've seen the expected upticks in incidents that tend to take place around school holidays, but no drastic increase. The slight increase in incidents that have been reported don't necessarily equate to being an increase in actual incidents. It may be that just schools are getting better at reporting, and that's been a key part of the NCSE's and my message in the past, which is to report, so that we do have that better evidence base. So that could actually be construed or seen as being a bit of a success in that regards. And just finally, vice society is prevalent in incidents over the last year. We understand that, and that's across all sectors, not specifically education. So it's not just that education is a falling victim to this particular threat actor. I'll go on to the next column, which is nation states. So there's no evidence of nation states targeting the school sector, but it is possible to be caught up in an untargeted attack by a nation state. And I'm thinking WannaCry in this instance. So that was malware that affected the NHS and schools a few years ago. I'm sure everyone can remember it. It was originally developed by North Korean actors. The ransomware wasn't aimed at schools, but it ended up spreading to them and affected them greatly, as did the NHS. So the point I'm trying to convey here is that a threat doesn't need to be targeted in order for it to have a negative impact on you or your school. And finally, I'll just talk briefly about the insider threat. And by that, I mean a member of staff, a pupil, a contractor, supplier that's working in the school. The phrase insider threat can, when I do these presentations, can come across as a little bit alarming. So I want to make the distinction here between accidental and those done on purpose. The overwhelming majority of cyber incidents caused by staff or pupils are accidental, and we know that. However, they can still have a significant impact on the operation of the school. It's really important for schools not to foster a culture of blame for accidental cyber incidents. It is really easy to make a mistake, whether it's clicking on a dodgy link or losing a USB stick. But we always say the important thing is that staff and pupils feel empowered, that they can report without fear of repercussions, because that isn't going to help anything. It's all around cultural behaviors, really, and setting a culture where you do feel that you can shout it out. And that way the IT can be up and running quicker and data recovered faster. And I'm sure you all understand that. On the flip side to this, I would also like to point out that very rarely members of staff or pupils can cause a cyber incident or attack on purpose. I won't go into the detail, but this could be for financial reasons, because a member of staff is disgruntled, or a pupil wants to test their cyber skills on a nice ready-made IT network. And I always think about it as the modern equivalent of setting off the fire alarm, but perhaps that's just showing my age. All these threats, whether targeted or untargeted, accidental or on purpose, can be mitigated by using some key cybersecurity approaches. I'll talk about them briefly at the end, but for now, I'll turn quickly to why these actors would target a school. So why would they target my school? Schools hold lots of sensitive data on pupils, parents, and staff, and that can be quite valuable to perpetrators for a range of reasons, from setting up fake bank accounts to reselling the details online. We all have heard stories about that going on the dark web. And schools can do carry out lots of financial transactions. Often these are only signed off by a few members of staff in a school. So cyber criminals might only need to target one or two of those individuals in order to steal or con a significant amount of money from the school or a supplier. And whilst the school may have a dedicated IT team or support, often that person has to do lots and lots of functions throughout the school, and there might not necessarily be a cybersecurity expert. And if they are, that is only a small part of their day job. So it can mean, I'm not saying in all instances, but it can mean that the school's IT systems are not as well protected as other organizations, and that makes them a softer target for cyber attackers. And that makes, with the idea of low hanging fruit, that's an opportunistic burglars, that's quite often what they'll go for. A school schools tend to have older legacy software, hardware that is more vulnerable to cyber attacks. And I talked to DFE quite a lot about this, but part of the kind of fear going forward is, as resources become even more stretched, that the focus on updating and replacing out-of-date software and hardware may shift to more pressing concerns in the schools. So we are all live to that, but again, that can exacerbate why schools could fall victim to cyber attacks more than other organizations. Schools are busy places where, quite rightly, the focus is on teaching, and that can mean security measures aren't adopted or discussed that could improve the school's cyber resilience. And they're just like a handful of the key reasons why perpetrators or threat actors may target a school. So I'm just going to briefly point to some of the cybersecurity resources aimed specifically at schools that we've developed over the last couple of years, or 3 to 4 years actually. What I would point out is that all these resources are highlighted and showcased at the Cybersecurity for Schools URL at the bottom there. So please don't think you need to remember all this. If you access the resource through that link, you should get to these resources and through to the blog page for the audit at the start of the presentation as well. I'll quickly run through a couple because I think they're quite interesting before we go into the technical presentation by Steve. First one I'd highlight is the governor's questions. So that they are questions for the governing body and trustees to ask school leaders. They're designed specifically for schools, and it's to help improve the school's understanding of its cybersecurity risks. They were developed in partnership with DFE. I think they actually live in the school governor's handbook that they send out. And they've, like I've said, been written to start that cybersecurity conversation between the governing body and school leaders. They are very high level questions, but they also give answers of what good might look like. So it's something that doesn't need to be instigated. This conversation doesn't need to be instigated by the school governors. You could, as a technical lead or an IT manager or network manager, highlight that document in any staff meetings, and the senior leaders can take forward that conversation as well. There's also the cybersecurity training for school staff. So I'll be very brief on this, but essentially there's a scripted presentation pack which you as IT managers could deliver if you wanted to your staff in a school, either an inset day or a staff meeting. It's all scripted. It's got a nice jazzy slide deck with embedded video case studies. Or if that format doesn't suit, there is a self-learn video which has exactly the same content, but is essentially, like it says, a YouTube video that staff can go off and watch by themselves. And for both those elements, a downloadable certificate can be obtained at the end to prove that that member of staff has done their training. And we would encourage that training to happen on a yearly basis. There's practical tips cards for schools that, again, just points out good cyber hygiene behaviors. And there's resources like the 10 steps to cybersecurity and the small business guide. I really would encourage you to have a look at the 10 steps to cybersecurity if you haven't already done so. They are aimed at medium to large organizations that have someone dedicated managing the organization's cybersecurity, but it gives out some very good steps on how you can manage your organization's cybersecurity, or how you could ask a supplier to manage your organization's cybersecurity. The small business guide it's going to be changed soon, so I think it will read small organizations guide, and I know schools aren't small organizations, but the tips and advice in there are absolutely appropriate for schools, and it's a little bit of a kind of high level, I don't like to use the word dumbed down, but a little bit more of a kind of basic version of 10 steps. There's a response and recovery guide, which helps small to medium-sized organizations prepare their response and plan for their recovery in the event of a cyber attack. And there's blogs around home learning tech and a really good video presentation on ransomware and how to do a proper backup. I'm now going to pass on to Steve, who will introduce himself and discuss some of the free technical resources and tools which are available to schools.
Thank you very much, Kerr. So welcome, my name is Steve F. I work with Kerr as part of the NCSE's I100 scheme, where people from industry get to work with NCSE in areas where they can bring external expertise and knowledge. So my day job is I work for Nominet as the head of products for Protective DNS, one of the NCSE's ACD services that Nominet deliver on behalf of NCSE. But previous to that, I worked at EiaB Education for over 13 years, hence why I work with Kerr, and I've been working with Kerr since my time at RM, so it's probably just over four years now. So when I was at RM, I worked in a multitude of roles, one of which was heading up the Network Solutions division. So you can all throw your virtual fruit at me for your thoughts on CC4. So I apologise for that, but hopefully that's history now, and we can move on from there. But I've spent a lot of time in education technology and worked with many schools over those 13 years. And I've probably spoken to some of you in the past. In fact, I can see from the comments and the questions that there are a number of people that I know and have spoken to in the past. I am an EduGeek member. My handle kind of gives my name away, but because I'm from the private sector, the rules aren't quite as strict for me as they are for Kerr. So please do reach out to me, Steve_Forbes, on EduGeek, if you do have any kind of questions post this webinar. I'll be happy to have a chat with anyone. So I want to talk through some of the ACD services that are available for schools. So as you probably know, as part of the National Cybersecurity Strategy, the active cyber defence was set up to tackle cyber attacks in a relatively automated and scalable way to improve the national resilience and help make the UK the safest place to live and work online. Now, there are around 43 different ACD services at different stages of their kind of product lifecycle. So we don't have enough time to talk about them all today. I'm just going to run through some of the more pertinent ones for schools. So the first one I want to talk about is WebCheck. So there were two new services that were made available to schools last year, or not new services, but schools were made newly eligible for to access these services. So the first is WebCheck. So WebCheck, you enter in your domains, and WebCheck will check your organization's websites for common vulnerabilities and misconfigurations. So it will check to see if the software is patched and up to date, if there's any issues with certificates or certificate chains, the TLS configuration and things like that. I'll just give you an overview of the health of your website and whether there's any security concerns from that perspective. Now, I know for many of you, your website that you have isn't necessarily a gateway into your school networks or anything from a kind of sensitive nature, but obviously it can have a a negative impact on the brand and reputation of the school if the website should be compromised and things changed, or perhaps it might be used as a proxy for other kind of malicious activity. So it is worth signing up to this. You can get the automated alert sent to you if anything changes, and web check detects that something's vulnerable to you. An overview of the dashboard there that kind of gives you a highlight of any particular challenges that you might have, and also gives you guidance and advice on what you need to do to remediate those as well. So really simple, but really effective in kind of just highlighting to you when your software might have gone out of date, you haven't quite kind of checked it recently, and it'll give you that proactive alert to say, hey, look, you need to go and update your software or your certificates or whatever it might be. So the next service I want to talk about was MailCheck. So this checks that your organization's email security is kind of compliant. So it collects and processes and analyzes the DMARC reports. So assuming you've implemented DMARC on your email, then it will check those and make sure that you've got kind of good email practices, and you're preventing email fraud and spam from your own kind of email domains. So again, from a reputational perspective, this just makes sure that people can be sure that when they're receiving emails from you, that they're actually genuinely from the school, particularly preventing things like phishing attacks or misinformation. And you get a nice dashboard that highlights to you how effective those implementations of DMARC's been in terms of things that have been blocked. Email that might have been sent that wasn't genuinely from your organisation, and where it's been blocked and who it's been blocked for. So again, kind of gives you that nice secure feeling that your email is as secure as it possibly can be. The next slide talks through exercise in a box. So this is absolutely free. All of these services, by the way, are free. This one's been free and available to everyone for a while. So what this does is help organizations test and practice their response to a cyber attack. So I noticed one of the questions in there is in the comments was around kind of what does that mean? What does it mean to be prepared for a cyber attack? And one of those things that exercise in a box helps you do is gain that confidence that you're prepared for a cyber attack. So it gives you a set of exercises mainly based around kind of the main cyber threats, and there are different exercises there that are relevant for different types of organizations, and there's plenty in there that are kind of relevant for a school setting. So all you need to do is sign up for there. There's a short registration, then you get access to all of the resources. Just kind of talk you through how it works. So once you've signed up and you've got access to the exercise in a box portal, you can pick and choose which type of exercises you want to do, and then you can get everything set up in terms of making sure everyone's aware what they need to do, coordinate all the exercise and everything. And then there's a couple of different types of exercises in there. So one is like a simulation exercise, which is kind of the technical side of things, a live exercise to detect and locate simulated cyber threats. And then the other one is a tabletop exercise, which is great for getting your SLT brought in and round the table to understand how you might respond to a cybersecurity incident or scenario. And then there's a post-exercise activity that allows you to kind of reflect on everything that you've done, how you might be able to improve, and lots of resources in there to help you build out that kind of incident response plan and how you might deal with a cybersecurity scenario. So this is really, really useful for engaging the wider school community and your senior management team in the need to prepare for a cyber attack. Now, the next one I want to talk about is called Early Warning. So if you haven't signed up for this yet, please do. So what does this do? Well, it informs you if there's threats against your network. So you input your your important domains and your IP addresses and things like that into the service, and then NCSE use their threat intelligence. Comes from a variety of sources, including some that you're not going to get anywhere else, so you're not going to kind of be able to buy off the shelf, and they will proactively notify you if there's any indication that there's activity within your networks that indicates a malicious incident. So these will include things like instant notifications that highlight highlight compromise of your systems. So there's some sort of activity, some sort of beaconing behavior, or something that indicates that there's an active compromise of your systems. It might be network abuse events where your assets are being used for malicious activity. So you're being used as a proxy. And so they'll kind of highlight those to you as well. And then there's vulnerability alerts. So indications that you've got vulnerable services, internet facing services that might be vulnerable to attack. So please do sign up to that. It's a great service that will kind of proactively notify you of things that quite often most organizations just don't know are happening on their networks. And this is a great way of identifying those things. So in terms of how you as IT managers and network managers and schools can help to protect the wider nation, the suspicious email reporting tool is really, really important. So the suspicious email reporting service, also known as SIRS, is a way for anyone to be able to flag to NCSC that they've discovered a malicious email. And so all you need to do is forward the email to report@phishing.gov.uk, and that will get analysed by NCSC. And where possible, they'll work with hosting companies and with some third-party companies to get those emails removed, taken down, or the services behind them removed and taken down. So if there's one way that you can kind of help protect the entire nation, if you do receive any suspicious emails, then please do forward those to report@phishing.gov.uk. And clearly, the more people that do that, the quicker we can respond to those types of things and get them taken down and protect everyone. So just wanted to finish, and it wouldn't be a presentation from myself unless I talked about PDNS. And so many of you will know PDNS. It blocks internet users from accessing malicious sites, hosting malware, viruses, and stops malware from calling home. So it's essentially a blocking DNS service. And it tells organizations what's been blocked, why it's been blocked, and any mitigation that's required. Now, as you probably all know, schools today are not eligible for protective for PDNS, but Nominet and NCSC have been working together to try and solve that problem, and we're in the final stages of discussions around a service that will be specifically set up for schools and enable schools to be protected by PDNS. Now, our plan here is to work with the main education ISPs to be able to onboard everyone onto the service as quickly as possible and get as many schools protected through those educational ISPs. So we'll be taking the DNS traffic from those ISPs and protecting them on Nominet's PDNS service. We expect this kind of roll out and kind of be delivered over the kind of next 6 to 12 months. So if in around 6 months' time you haven't heard anything from your ISP about being protected by PDNS, then please do give them a nudge, get them to kind of talk to Nominet, because we'll be engaging with all those ISPs to make sure as many of you are protected by PDNS as possible without you having to actually do anything. That's it from me. So I think we've got quite a few questions coming through.
And there's quite a few been posted up. So here we go. From Nick Batchelor, what is it to feel prepared for a cyber attack?
I think that's a really good question. So I would, there's no specific one size fits all piece of advice or checklist that the NCSE could produce that say, if you've done that, you're not going to suffer from a cyber attack or a cyber incident. And I use the word cyber incident quite a lot because quite a lot of the stuff that comes across my desk isn't because there is this advanced persistent threat state actor that's prized open the network of a school. It's because quite often it is an insider event or an accident or something that wasn't done as well as it potentially could have been done. So I would always say that if it's impossible to completely prevent a cyber attack, but are there ways to mitigate it? So I would plan. I know this is very broad, woolly language, but I would expect and prepare for a cyber incident. So what could you not do without? So I wouldn't, if you're strapped for resource, if you can't cover everything on your school's network, think about what your crown jewels are, protect them. Think about what you couldn't do without to operate as a school. And sometimes I see schools or hear of schools that have closed down simply because they haven't produced hard copies of the information on the management information system, which on safeguarding or medical records, and that has meant a school has had to close. So it's unfortunately it's one of those things that I can't give you a very prescriptive, straightforward answer, because there isn't a straightforward answer. I imagine it's going to be different for each type of school about what the amount of resources they have, but I would be wanting to have that discussion all the way across the school, that expecting a cyber attack or an incident, rather than it being surprised that one's going to happen. Having it on the risk register, thinking about where your crown jewels are, think about what you couldn't do without, and have just basic things like lists of people of what they're meant to be doing when that happens, and who are the lists of all your suppliers, and is there an agreement across those suppliers about what their actions are going to be when an incident happens. So it's those sorts of high level questions, and all that is contained within our website. So if you go onto that website, that link there, if you look at the school governors questions, it covers that. And the response and recovery guide also covers that as well. You're more than welcome to come in as well, Steve, if you'd like.
And the next from Abhi Patel: how would the NCSC advise schools on implementation of multi-factor authentication in schools, especially when most schools in the UK won't allow the use of mobile phones? Even more so with DfE pushing for the banning of all mobile phones in schools. Where does the budget come from for hardware tokens?
So Steve's been looking at this piece of work, or this question, this exact question actually, over the last couple of weeks. So I'm gonna let you come in there, Steve, if you'd like. Steve, do you want to come in, or do you want me to answer this?
Sorry, I thought, am I unmuted now?
No, you're not muted.
Fantastic. So yeah, clearly there's a broad range of acceptance of mobile phones in schools across the UK, and many of the people that we've engaged with and spoken to in terms of how they've implemented MFA have had the buy-in from their senior management team to allow the use of mobile phones, and particularly, as where you say, there's not necessarily the budget for hardware tokens, and so that's kind of where they started, is that engagement at the senior level to say, hey, look, we need to do something here. We need to implement multi-factor authentication. We've got two choices. We either shell out for hardware tokens, and we need to find the budget for it, or we accept a slight change in our policy and allow the use of mobile phones for some specific activities. And that tends to be where people have managed to kind of overcome those challenges. Now, I appreciate that's not going to work in all schools, and there'll be kind of different views on the use of mobile phones and everything. But that engagement at the kind of senior level and an understanding of why MFA is so important is the most important thing to start with, and then try and work through the different options and understand how you might implement it.
Okay. From Nick Batchelor: are there any security-focused DNS providers suitable for schools? It's one area that is less well protected. Sorry, I'm just going to read that again. It's one area that is less well protected, a concern given that many services use magic DNS entries for authorization, etc.
So
I'll let you go for that.
I mean, so as I said, we are looking to implement protective DNS for schools, whereby it'll be essentially the same service that's provided for the rest of the public sector by Nominet will be provided for schools. It just be we're standing up a specific instance of it. So that should solve that issue, because you'll have a dedicated security-focused DNS provider, along that works with NCSC to provide that DNS for you.
So, and so what the NCSC won't do, what you won't find us doing, is saying this specific provider does that specific provider does, we recommend this one over another one. There'll be a scheme, and there'll be those that are moving forward on that scheme, because the offer is for everybody. Every school should be able to access this PDNS protection as long as their provider is signed up to it and running forward with it. and then it will just be a simple case of whoever is procuring that service needs to make a decision about whether they want to continue with a provider that doesn't take up that offer. So it won't be for NCSE to put a list of them together. There'll need to be a kind of bit of a due diligence done for whenever you're procuring or moving forward again, renewing a contract with your existing provider.
From David Hicks, if our users are reporting phishing via Gmail, does that data get passed on to you?
So when you say, so the suspicious email reporting service that Steve mentioned there, it's not like I sit there with reams and reams of data. It will get fed into a big machine, and it will get managed and dealt with that way, and we'll get high-level stats. So it won't be that I will get a specific inquiry about a phishing attempt. It will just form part of a wider report into what's going on in the sector. And it isn't normally, what we don't see is that there is a campaign against education or schools and not other sectors. They tend to be all kind of banded together in the same sector. So it doesn't get passed on to me personally, but it does get fed into the greater machine. What's your thoughts there, Steve?
I think perhaps the question is around if on Gmail, if you're reporting it using the native reporting tool in Gmail, does that information then get passed to NCSE? And I don't think it does. Using the report@phishing.gov.uk is the most effective way of getting that data to NCSE, rather than obviously use the report phishing within your native tools as well. But if you want to make sure NCSE are getting that information, then use the report@phishing.gov.uk.
And from Tony Ayer, there was no mention of police cyber alarm. Is this a tool you recommend we utilize?
It's not an NCSE endorsed tool. So it's again, I'll sort of echo the sentiment of what I said in the previous question around DNS providers. We're not gonna say you should or shouldn't use this product. What I would say is that early warning is a product that does a similar function and has been endorsed and assured by NCSE. So that is a product that we have presented on today. Police cyber alarm is not a product that we can unfortunately endorse or not endorse. And I fully appreciate that is from DFE. That is it's in their guidance that people should implement police cyber alarm, or at least register to police cyber alarm. But that would need to, and I know it has been an ongoing discussion, that would need to be a discussion with DFE about whether they endorse it.
Yeah. From Graham Chalker, would moving to Azure cloud services reduce the risk or be equally as vulnerable?
So, I mean, I imagine Steve's going to come in here in a minute. So NCSE is quite keen about the cloud. So where you don't have the ability to, and again, if I'm reading the question wrong, please do come in, Steve, but where an organization doesn't have the ability to manage those services in-house, I think it's proportionate and correct that they should be moving to those providers that inherently skilled and very knowledgeable and very good at rolling out products that produce service but also provide security at the same time. So as part of knowing the sector and knowing the resource implications that the sector has to deal with and the growing functionality of the cloud, it's something that we do encourage schools to do. And again, we're not saying that those with on-prem aren't secure. We're just saying we're looking at it realistically and looking at what the resource is like in a school setting, and we're coming to the conclusion that sometimes if a well-configured cloud services is perhaps the way to go. I don't know if you want to come in there, Steve.
Yeah, I think that well configured is probably the most important bit.
Yeah.
So just moving your services to Azure Cloud doesn't inherently make them more secure. Now, obviously, you do benefit from some of the mass scale and the infrastructure that Microsoft provide in the case of Azure. But if you stand up Azure Cloud services and they're not configured correctly, then they can be just as vulnerable and just as insecure as anything that you've got on premise. So you really do have to understand what services you're buying into and what your responsibility is in terms of running those services. Clearly, if you're standing up lots of infrastructure as a service, then you've got that same responsibility for configuration and the security around that infrastructure. As you move more towards platform as a service, then Microsoft take on some more of that responsibility. But it is absolutely really important to understand what your responsibility is in terms of configuration and making sure you've got the right skills and time to maintain those services is really important as well.
Okay. And another from Tony here. How do you handle multi-factor authentication with younger children, primary age children, for example?
So we're not a school, so we don't handle MFA with younger people. But we're completely live to the idea, or we're live to the fact that would be an extreme. There are extreme challenges to that. That's not to say it's impossible. So I think Steve alluded to it earlier that he's been doing a little bit of work on this, and I'd say for those schools that are finding the whole idea of 2FA or MFA an absolute nightmare, is to kind of start somewhere. So you may just want to start with staff and implement to MFA to important accounts, maybe one or two important accounts or accounts that are accessed remotely. That might be a way where you want to start, and then just through time move down through the age groups where younger children are concerned, or just start with the older children. But I wouldn't. It's not NCSE to say exactly what that piece of guidance would look like. It's something that potentially a school out there might be doing it already, so there might be a case study already. But I would say start at the top, bring in your senior leadership, as Steve mentioned. Start with that kind of incremental change across the organization, and before you know it, something quite alien to members of staff will just be seen as normal, just like they do with every day with their accounts in a personal setting. And actually, for over time, I think that question might more be easily answered. I don't know if you've got any specifics on that, Steve.
No, I mean, I'd just echo what you say. Start with your crown jewels. Start with the things that are most important to you first in terms of data and protecting that, and which normally means your senior leadership team and your school staff. Those who have access to that important data, and then kind of work your way towards the other things. But I don't think we are suggesting that everyone in the whole school should be using MFA 100% of the time. That's certainly kind of not what we're suggesting. We're saying find out what's most important to you. Find out, work out what you need to protect and what's most important for you to protect, and do that first, and then work your way through. And if you never get to turning on MFA for key stage 1, that's up to you to determine whether that's an acceptable risk for you or not. And in most cases, that probably is an acceptable risk. And actually, the crown jewels are with what the staff can access from rather than what the pupils can access.
Okay. And again from Jean Curtin, would PDNS still work for staff devices that were off-site and connected to home networks rather than the school network?
So we do have a digital roaming agent that we can use to deploy onto devices that connect users directly to PDNS. So it kind of configures the device to use PDNS as the DNS provider directly, rather than going through the network and the DNS settings on the network. That's not something that we're going to kind of be deploying on day one. We're certainly looking at how we can protect the majority of people the majority of the time from day one. But we do have that as an option as we go further down through the project, in that we could use that application to protect staff devices.
And from Daniel Bramall, can I please ask your view on how to go about boosting my skills, the most beneficially impactful skills, to do my bit to help with the current situation? Thank you all for your contributions to UK.
that's a really good question. I'm glad Daniel's asked that question, because we're absolutely live to the fact that those the technical audience in the school have got so much to do, and like I said in the presentation, cybersecurity is just one small part of that. I would absolutely look at that cybersecurity for schools webpage. We've tried to not be overly prescriptive in it, and we have tried to not fill it with absolutely anything that has got to do with cybersecurity in schools. So I would really start with looking at the training. It's staff training, but that does not mean it's not appropriate for those working in the IT environment as well. I would look at the 10 steps to cybersecurity, and if that just feels a little bit too heavy at this point in time, look at the small business guide. I would look at, I think they would be very good places to start, but anything on that cybersecurity website would be a good place to start. And if you think there's something around a piece in the future around something to do with improving skills across the IT the IT management profession in the school sector, that's absolutely something you could put through either to myself directly or through EduGeek, so that I can have that conversation with the Department for Education, because we are aware that there is a space that I think there is more that could be done, whether that's in terms of signposting or actually doing and delivering something a bit more bespoke.
And from Nick Batchelor, similarly, does the NCSC have any published thoughts on immutable cloud backup versus offline backup? If not, do you have any thoughts on how we might frame a discussion around this topic?
I mean, I'm conscious that so I'm not technical, so it goes back to one of these questions right at the start is, do you feel prepared for what is feeling prepared for a cyber incident? And one of the first things I would say to myself is, have I got a proper backup? Now that term proper backup is pretty broad, eh? So it has to be a backup that works for you, but it also has to be a backup that can't be corrupted and is properly segregated. And there is the obvious 3-2-1 rule, and there's pages and pages of advice about this on the NCSC internet or web page. So does this question stem from some of the stuff that has been coming out from DFE on the topic? Would be my question. Because I think what the NCSC's position is going to be is not to be overly prescriptive, but to have some good core principles.
Yes. Yeah. Do we have any more questions, Sean? I think that's it for the day. Okay, I'd like to thank you both, Kerr and Steve. It's been an amazing session, this. It really has. I think everybody's got a lot out of it. And I thank you very, very much for joining us today. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot,
Alan.
Chris. Thank you. Thanks a lot, everybody. Okay.